With the upcoming release of Asteroid City, I wanted to take a closer look at Wes Anderson's early career by exploring something we both have in common. A very strange relationship with our high school, which also happens to be the set of his second film ever, Rushmore. Rushmore is a weird movie. It tells the story of a very eccentric Max Fisher.
I'm sorry, did someone say my name?
Who's wildly enthusiastic about school in every way except for the school part.
He's one of the worst students we've got.
He finds his way into befriending successful industrialist Herman Bloom, a melancholic divorcee who becomes enamored by Max's enthusiasm.
You seem to have it pretty figured out.
Their unusual friendship becomes the focal point of the film, as the two begin to compete for the romantic attention of a young kindergarten teacher, Rosemary Cross. Everything about this story breaks away from normal high school coming-of-age storytelling conventions, where a typical academically struggling student may strive to overcome this barrier. Max instead spends his time planning ornate theatrical productions which are actually pretty good. Where a young man may strive for the love of his high school sweetheart, Max engages in a very creepy pursuit of a very inappropriate relationship. Rushmore is such a weird movie. Yet, this is how Wes Anderson feels about his project.
It shows you a way to be heroic and still be a horrible student and get rejected from all your schools and fail in all kinds of ways but succeed in other ways. I think if I had seen this movie when I was 15 years old, that would have been my movie. That would have been it would have changed me.
And I kind of agree. How does Wes Anderson make such a strange story so charming and so real? Well, he stole a lot from two of his favorite movies, The 400 Blows and The Graduate.
This movie in particular, I think, was one of the reasons I started thinking I would like to try to make movies.
And somehow, The Graduate is a movie that Owen and I have gotten into our consciousness in a way where whenever we write a script, we end up feeling like we just stole 100 things from The Graduate and we can't point out what they are.
Well, let me show you. Both of these films take a page out of the 1950s to 1960s film movement, the French New Wave, which started when a group of French film critics came together to call for a change in popular cinema.
Cinema.
Their dream was twofold: to focus on telling raw stories that get at the heart of human psychology, and to encourage filmmakers to break away from normal filmmaking conventions and replace them with unusual, novel techniques. By focusing on raw stories about characters who are sometimes sympathetic, sometimes despicable,
Did you say my mom gave you a hand job?
and sometimes just plain confusing.
What's your dad do, Max?
He's a neurosurgeon at St. Joseph's Hospital.
And by telling those stories in their own style, their own personal way, they express their perspective on how people tend to be complex and why they tend to be that way. But Wes Anderson did more than just take broadly from the French New Wave. He was also heavily influenced by The 400 Blows and The Graduate. Well, I sat down and watched these movies, and it seemed to me that Wes Anderson just combined all the traits from these two movies to create Rushmore. In The 400 Blows, French New Wave originator Francois Truffaut tells a semi-autobiographical story about a delinquent young student. He's sympathetic at times, and other times, not so much. He eventually runs into trouble with the law, is transferred to a correctional school, until he performs one last act of defiance by running away, shown to the audience in grand style by the director. The similarities are pretty blatant. In The Graduate, auteur Mike Nichols tells a story about a young graduate facing his very relatable fears of an uncertain future.
It entails that if you fail another class, you'll be asked to leave Rushmore.
Because of his uncertainties, he gets caught in a love triangle with an older woman.
Let me out. I'm in love with her.
I was in love with her first.
He begins to do unrelatable things. The movie starts to get absurd and funny, but also sad. Their styles feature long takes, intricate staging, an emphasis on interesting compositions,
Robinson, you're trying to seduce me.
and a plucky score or acoustic heavy soundtrack. So how could all of this influence not be viewed as blatant plagiarism?
It could have been worse.
You could make the argument that it's in the combination of these two works that Anderson creates something unique. For example, Wes Anderson often explores Max's academic delinquency by motivating it through the love triangle conflict. He takes that awkward absurdity of The Graduate
Mrs. Robinson, will you forgive me for what I just said?
and combines it with the raw look at Max's inability to succeed. While the combination of these tones undeniably creates a charming and saddening observation of a troubled student, I don't think that alone is what makes Rushmore especially impactful. What makes Rushmore special is simply Wes Anderson, his unique way of capturing the world, and his personal history with his experience in high school. Wes Anderson's consistent dedication to symmetry and planimetric composition isn't something that was ever seen before. Those overhead shots looking down at Max's hands or the curtains introducing each month, they're uniquely Wes Anderson. I find those quick pans and pauses when someone enters a room to be so weird and so funny. And that opening montage where Max is just awkwardly staring into the camera, it's just so charming every time I see it. By making all these fresh choices, Wes Anderson presents the world in a way audiences just aren't used to seeing. And those choices give this strange story a very strange appeal. But while the visual style may give Rushmore its unique charm, it's Wes Anderson's personal, real-life story he tells through Max that makes it feel so real.
The stuff we draw, like the school where we filmed is my school, and the plays that he puts on...
Your school in Houston?
Yes, my school in Houston. That's where we shot it. And the plays that he puts on are sort of inspired by some plays I put on when I was very young. I mean, these are pretty personal movies. Like this movie, Rushmore, is very personal to me and Owen.
It's interesting because when I watch Anderson's Rushmore, I feel the reality of its world even more because I recognize Rushmore's similarities to our mutual alma mater. Our high school was beautiful in a lot of ways. There were a ton of niche, student-led extracurriculars, its small community welcomed free thinkers, and the faculty tended to care about your individual success. But its environment tended to create ample pressure on academic excellence, and that academic excellence tended to define your identity. Expectations were high, performances were compared, and class participation was scrutinized. I remember when college applications would come around and you had people wearing their Ivy League admissions on their sleeves. And then you had people like me who, frankly, just tried to avoid the topic entirely. That academic pressure to succeed could be subtle, it could be overt, but it was definitely always there. The reason why I talk about all this is because it makes so much sense that a guy like Max could be created in an academic environment like this. I knew people like Max, who, no matter what, couldn't make good grades.
I don't know what to do anymore.
And when you're in a group conversation with them and someone brings up college or how easy a test was or how dumb another student looked, I knew Maxes whose self-esteem took a hit every time. Maybe these Maxes could dominate a conversation or a stage, but they were eventually reminded that they couldn't be good enough to succeed because they just don't fit that mold. I've been Max. I've felt the same pressure, and I've made poor choices trying to compensate for my own shortcomings. I look at a great artist like Wes Anderson, and I can't help but see a Max who is just so talented in so many ways, but couldn't see that in himself in an environment like this. This is why Rushmore works. Yes, the French New Wave, the 400 Blows, and The Graduate all influenced his style and story, but at the end of the day, it works because Wes Anderson brought his own charming vision and his own real story. And for all of that, all of the influences, all of the innovations, and all of the life lessons, Rushmore is such a weird movie. A weird movie that Maxes, like me, can appreciate.